Out of all genres of cars, SUVs are the ones that get the most abuse, that get stigmatised for being unnecessarily large, taking up too much space in the car park and on the roads. And, well, there are militant people out there that literally go around and join organisations to slash people's tyres who own this type of vehicle. So they clearly get a lot of, divisiveness, should we say, in comment sections and whatnot. I personally am not a fan of SUVs as a whole, but that's more of a style thing. I mean, they're typically bigger, less efficient, more expensive to buy and run, don't handle as well, don't really have that much more interior space if at all. They're essentially a worse car than a traditional hatch they're often based on, and for that alone I don't particularly like them. But in terms of people getting the abuse for owning an SUV, for driving around in one, isn't it going a little too far? I don't just mean the tyre slashers, which is bang out of order. I'm on about just in general. It's something that's talked about online a lot as well, in terms of people buying these unnecessarily stupidly big cars. I'm not saying I'm in favour of A or B. I'm just saying, look, this is what I'm saying. This is my point. Are SUVs unnecessarily stigmatised? Are they getting a lot of abuse, or whatever you want to call it, unfairly, quite frankly? Are the people that own them getting this sort of crap ultimately, and it's not deserved? Or are you one of these that thinks, no, let's get rid of them now? As I said, I'm not a fan of SUVs. I personally think they typically look ugly. But people choose them, not just because they think they're better or there's a higher driving position, which is a thing. I mean, I like driving a van because you have that higher driving position. You can see more over the walls on these beautiful country roads. You can see further into the distance. On the motorway, you feel a bit safer. You do. It's not just the fact that you're higher up. It is a nicer experience, I guess. But forgetting all that, let's have a look at SUVs as a whole and why I think that a lot of people are getting this sort of stigma unfairly. Let's start by looking at the type of car. This is the first point I'd like to make, that a lot of cars out there get the SUV, idiot sort of thing unnecessarily. It's not really an SUV. And I know there are crossovers and blurred lines and grey areas. Is it or isn't it an SUV? For me, there's a lot out there that are simply not sports utility vehicles, which traditionally used to be a car that gives you a lifestyle that you couldn't get with other vehicles. Four-wheel drive, for example, and capabilities that others don't have. SUV has now become synonymous with just a large car. So let's just carry that on for a second and think, yes, I'll use SUV, but generally I mean a big vehicle. I saw a recent report on the tyre slasher people, these guys. And it was videoing on the street, the news guy were there, and there was lots of tyres slashed. There was a Volkswagen Tiguan. And I remember seeing next to that was a Volkswagen Golf Estate. And it got me thinking, and it's something that's come up before as well, thinking, well, hang on a minute, why did the Golf Estate not get its tyres slashed? Well, it's not a big car, is probably the response. But I've done a little bit of research. Let me go with phone. A Golf Estate, again, the car from that video, alongside its Volkswagen stablemate, the Volkswagen Tiguan, is 4.567 metres. The Tiguan, which did get its tyres slashed, is 4.486 metres. So therefore, essentially, the Golf Estate is a longer vehicle. The Tiguan is about that much wider, but in terms of the footprint of that car, the SUV has a smaller footprint. It takes up less space, less real estate in a parking spot, on the road, than the Golf Estate, which everybody is fine with. And you think, well, hang on a minute. What is the metric here for what is too large? Does a taller car instantly make it become bad? I would assume that the footprint of the car is worse. I mean, a lot of SUVs are based on a smaller vehicle. Like, Golf and Tiguan are essentially share the same platform, for example. But they're often the same sort of size in terms of they're just like a taller version. The Tesla Model Y is essentially the same size as a Model 3. It's just taller. Most people think the Tesla Model Y is better, not just because it's a hatchback, but because it's taller and bigger and all the things that people want. So that's what I'm saying. Is the footprint the most important part of how much space a car takes up? For me, it is, because it's taking up more space in the parking spot, for example. And there's a lot of examples I could have given like that, where the car is actually bigger than the SUV that's getting the abuse. I've even looked at the weight, and although a Golf diesel estate versus a Tiguan estate, the Tiguan is about 70 kilograms heavier. The petrol Tiguan is lighter than the Golf diesel estate. So what I'm trying to say is, someone driving a Tiguan with a petrol engine would be lighter than someone driving the perfectly acceptable Golf diesel estate. I know it's very difficult to know how much a car weighs by looking at it, but just because a car is tall, just because it looks like an SUV, it doesn't mean it's a bad thing, does it? I don't know. What do you think in the comments? Is a Kia Niro a bad car because it has the shape of an SUV, but ultimately isn't really any bigger than a traditional hatchback? The Tesla Model S is a massive car by UK standards, but that doesn't get any of the bad press compared to the Model X, which is essentially the same footprint but taller. So just looking at a car and thinking, SUV, idiot, it's not really a good thing to do for me. That's something that needs to stop. I don't know what metric we use to say that is too big and that's acceptable, but you get what I'm trying to say. The next point is the people driving these things. So let me give you an example of somebody who lived on my street. He is a tree surgeon. He had a big pickup, double cab, I think it was Toyota, huge thing it was. Got a brand new one every few years. And he said, well, I need to tow heavy objects for my tree surgery business. I need to throw stuff in the back of the pickup for, again, the business. But it's also the car I use for family stuff, for going to the shops in, for all the stuff that we use our cars for, hence the double cab. So you could see this person driving around, and it wasn't liveried up or anything like that, driving around, maybe by himself, just going to the shops, let's say. Oh, look at that idiot in a massive vehicle, what a moron. What other alternative did he have? If he would have bought a second car, a small one, to do the shop running and kids and things like that, no one would bat an eyelid. But then that's saying that two cars is better than one big one. It's not really, is it? I think one big car is better than a big car and a small car, or even two small cars. So again, you don't know why that person has bought that car. Yes, he is probably the exception rather than the rule, don't get me wrong. There's a lot of people out there with used cars that never use its capabilities or even close to it. But my point is, you don't know. Looking at someone, looking at a car, especially the whole let's slash everybody's tyres that may need that car for their work or whatever, is the wrong way of going about it. It is just unfair. And again, unless you know that person's an idiot, a moron, whatever you're calling them, then just leave them alone, because you don't know what they're like. I used to live near a paramedic. He had a four-wheel drive, I think it was an Octavia Scout. He says, I don't need four-wheel drive, but for 2-3 weeks of the year, whatever it turns out to be, I have to get to work. If it's snowing, I have to get to work. My wife works for the police. You can't just ring in and go, oh, I'm afraid I'm stuck, I can't get out of my driveway. You got to get there. She's had to walk a couple of miles to the nearest police station before, because, well, if you ring the police up, even when it's snowing, you expect a response. So that's why he had what he had. He only needed it a few weeks of the year, as I said, but it was a requirement, even though not a regular one. Let's not prejudge people, I guess, which is very politically good these days, isn't it? It's good social media things. Another car that seems to get good press and never anyone has a problem with is something like, to stick with Volkswagens, the ID Buzz, this thing. It looks cool, it's a van essentially, but people use it for day-to-day driving around in. They're all right, apparently, even though it's a much bigger car than, again, the Tiguan that gets the abuse. I was even part of a fully charged live discussion on the stage about how we get rid of this SUV obsession that the country has. And part of me was thinking, do we have this obsession? Yes, a car's taller, but does that necessarily instantly make it a bad thing? Now, of course, as I say many times in our car reviews, another bloody SUV. Every car that comes out seems to be another SUV style car at least. And you think, oh, not again. Why are manufacturers pushing these on us? The answer is they're not. They're not pushing anything on us. They're giving us what we want, quite frankly. I don't particularly like them, but my point is, people are choosing SUVs. So the manufacturer looks at the stats and goes, well, no one's buying the Micra, the Nissan Micra, they're buying the Duke. Many people are buying the Model Y over the Model 3. So let's give them more of what essentially you're buying, and we're buying, I'm buying. Bigger cars. That's what they're responding to. They're not saying, here's more SUVs, that's what we want to sell you. They're giving you what you're buying, quite frankly. So the way to stop manufacturers making lots of SUVs is to stop buying them. And I get it. Again, going back to the Tiguan example, that's a few £100 in terms of price difference between the standard Golf and the standard entry-level Tiguan. So you're like, well, 200-300, I'll go for the bigger car. I'm getting more car. Of course I'm going to go for that one. So how do we overcome this SUV obsession? Well, stop buying them, for one, would be nice. Small cars are brilliant. That's why I bought the Seat Me, because it's efficient, it's chuckable, you can park it easily, it's brilliant around town. But at the end of the day, if you're doing a long journey, you tend to want something that's more armchair-like, don't you? Now, for me, yes, there are people out there that probably are buying something unnecessarily large just to take little Quentin to the school or whatever. Let's go down the cliche route here. I work in schools. I have done for 20 odd years, probably hundreds of schools over that career. And there is one rule: you don't leave at 3:15 if you're at a school, because for the love of God, you're not getting out. It's the school run. Cars just piled up on the pavements all over the place. It's a mess. But sometimes you just kind of look outside and look at all the cars, and you see little Jimmy and Sophie or whatever getting into a massive Range Rover and think, that's just unnecessary. But is it? How do I know that they're not a farmer, or they're not towing a horse box, or they haven't a genuine reason to get that car? Most won't, but... So how do we change people's perceptions in terms of, well, getting something much larger than they need? Well, for me, it's just human nature. How many people watching this have, and me, I would include myself in this, have a house that's bigger than they need? Maybe you have a 4-bedroom and there's only 2 of you because the kids have gone. What a waste. I can't believe you're taking up this much space. I mean, you could say this for almost anything in life. I have a TT Roadster in the garage. It barely comes out, does less than 1,000 miles a year. I don't need that. I can't justify it in any way, but no one's having a go at me because it's not an SUV. It's kind of unfair, really, and this is kind of my point. SUVs are an easy target, and I genuinely believe that we do need to reduce the size and weight of a lot of stuff out there, especially in EV land, even though this video is about any car. But I think there are better ways of doing it. I guess that's my point of this video. Why don't we try and do what we do with things like alcohol and smoking and things like that? Make them socially unacceptable. Not by slashing people's tyres, but just by changing people's thought, the culture behind them. Other countries, for example, their car tax or road fund licence, if you will, is based on weight rather than, in our case, emissions. So the heavier the car, the more you pay. Would you be in favour of that? I don't know. I genuinely don't know. Emissions may be the best way of doing it, or maybe weight is the best way of doing it. We can't have it both ways, because you could have a big car that's using less emissions than a small car. So which do we prioritise? Let me know in the comments which you would choose if you were in power. Would you change the tax, the road tax, what I'll call it, to weight? So that would naturally have an effect on people, like it does with the emissions. If something's £500-600 a year tax, less people buy it. So would that change people's perceptions of your big Range Rovers and your big SUVs, whatever car we're talking about? Would that make people choose smaller vehicles? Would it make manufacturers think, let's try and make this a bit lighter? And lightness is a good thing. It means it's more efficient, it's better at handling. So I don't know if you call this a ranty video or what it is, but ultimately I've seen so much, again, abuse to people who buy an SUV or just go, oh look, I've got a Defender or a Nero or a Tiguan or whatever, and it's unnecessary. Like the tree surgeon guy. He needs that. Do you think, would you be happy with him buying 2 cars rather than 1? All that sort of stuff. So I guess what I'm saying is maybe we should talk to each other rather than abuse each other. That would be nice. And let me know in the comments, what would you do? If you're in power now, you're the transport minister, you're in charge, What do you do to change people's perceptions? Do you tax heavier vehicles and therefore there would be a natural kind of move to lighter, more efficient stuff? I know people do want light, small hatchbacks, but they're not choosing that, are they? This is something that came up on the Fully Charged Life thing. There was, I can't remember who it was, but she said, well, people want small little hatchbacks, yay! But no one's buying them again. No one's choosing to get them. They're going for the Duke instead of the Nissan Micra. So clearly that's not the case. We all love them and like them, but given the choice, if someone says, right, company car time, would you like this Range Rover? You go, really? All right then. And as I said, do we pick apart people's houses next? Do we pick apart people's other choices? Do you look at the portion sizes of the meals? I mean, where does this stop? So yeah, anyway, as I said, if you're in charge, what would you do to change the whole car size problem thing? Okay, right, I'm done. Bit of a different video this time. It's just something I wanted to get out there because, as I said, I've been seeing this online an awful lot. And even in person, when you start seeing that at somebody driving past and you're in an SUV or something, you think, well, why would you do that? Anyway, I'm done now. Thank you for watching. I hope you had a great Christmas and I'll see you soon. Don't forget to like, subscribe, all the usual crap. The members only button, that's 99p a month, gets you these videos on Sunday instead of Friday, and there's occasional other benefits as well. And don't forget about the second channel, Driving Home, where the behind the scenes stuff and the podcast, when we can be bothered to make it, appears all on there. So again, thanks for watching guys, and I'll see you soon.